You think you know the man you married after 30 years in the same zip code, sharing everything but secrets. You'd bet your life on it. But here I am, staring down a truth sharper than shattered glass, the betrayal a cold blade twisting in my gut. Richard, my husband, isn't who I thought he was. Maybe he never was. Finding out about him and Beth, a woman I welcomed into our Upper East Side apartment, a supposed friend, it was like the city skyline crumbling around me. Memories flickered, twisted, every shared moment recast in the harsh light of deception. But then the fog cleared. I saw a choice, not the easy escape of walking away. No, leaving would be too clean, too quick. I'd stay, unravel their carefully constructed lie thread by thread. A smile touched my lips, thinking of Jake, an old flame from college, someone Richard would never suspect, someone who'd relish helping me turn this betrayal into a masterpiece of revenge. It started subtly, almost a year ago, those little pinpricks you ignore until they become a constant ache. Late nights at the office, hushed phone calls he'd dismiss as demanding clients. 30 years with Richard, I knew when he was lying. A man who could sway juries couldn't fake sincerity across a breakfast table. Small tells, but glaring to me. A hesitation too long, a glance at the door when his phone buzzed. One Friday, Richard claimed a late brief. I nodded, a silent promise forming in my mind. I followed him, a shadow trailing his black SUV across town, downtown, then across the bridge to a discreet hotel in Brooklyn. And there she was, Beth, waiting under the neon glow of the hotel sign. They embraced. A quick, intimate press of bodies, their faces brushing in a way that stole my breath. Seeing them together, it was a physical blow. Driving back to our silent apartment felt like a dream, the weight of betrayal crushing me. Days blurred into a ghostly wander through our home, memories replaying, questions echoing. Was this a fleeting mistake, or had this been festering for years? One thing was clear: they would pay. As the initial shock gave way to a cold fury, the plan began to form. I'd make Richard regret ever underestimating me, but I needed an accomplice. And Jake Murphy, my college sweetheart, sharp as a tack, always holding a grudge, was the perfect choice. A quick online search confirmed he was back in the city, a freelance journalist now. I reached out to Jake, pretending nostalgia, a friendly catch-up. We met at a low-key cafe in the village, a place Richard would never frequent. Seeing Jake again was surreal, like stepping into a faded photograph. Years had etched lines around his eyes, softened his edges, but that sharp intellect still burned bright. "Olivia," he said, his gaze direct, "what brings you back into my orbit?" "Maybe," I deflected, a small smile playing on my lips. "Just wanted to see an old friend." His gaze didn't waver. He saw right through the facade. I leaned closer, voice low, the words spilling out. "It's Richard. He's having an affair with Beth." The shift in his expression was subtle, a flicker of intrigue igniting in his eyes. "And you want my help?" he asked, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Not just help," I said, a thrill coursing through me as I laid out my plan. "I want to make them pay." The spark in Jake's eyes was unmistakable. He was hooked. Richard was a master of words, twisting truths, crafting plausible lies for juries, for me. But there's a difference between distraction and deception. Richard's late nights, hushed calls, the way he flinched when I touched him at dinner, the signs were there, in hindsight. But I'd chosen to ignore them, to believe the comfortable lie. That night, following him to that hotel, I almost turned back. It was unlike me, this cloak and dagger act. But an undeniable force, a desperate need for truth, propelled me forward. When I saw Beth's silhouette under the hotel awning, her head tilted towards Richard in that sickeningly intimate way, everything snapped into focus. They were oblivious, lost in their secret world. I watched, paralyzed, as they embraced under the dim parking lot lights, Richard holding her with a familiarity, a natural ease that mirrored how he once held me. The days after were a numb blur. Every detail, every smile, every shared joke, replayed, tainted. How long had this been going on? Was I the only fool who hadn't seen it? And the agonizing question, why? The anger came later, a slow burn that replaced the ice shock. For years, I'd been the supportive wife, the anchor. As Richard climbed the corporate ladder, I'd cheered his victories, downplayed his setbacks, smoothed every rough edge. I was his confidant, his partner, the one who truly knew him, or so I believed. Now, every whispered promise, every loving word felt like a cruel joke. Confrontation, screaming, demanding answers, the obvious path. But something held me back. Pride, maybe. A a refusal to let him see me broken, to give him the satisfaction of my pain. Or perhaps a darker instinct, a realization that he'd see it as a victory, his liberation. He'd be the clever one who outsmarted me. Unacceptable. In those dark moments, Jake Murphy resurfaced in my mind. Decades since we'd parted ways, amicably, but with something unresolved, an unspoken connection lingering. Jake had always been intense, with a journalist's relentless drive to uncover secrets. If anyone could help me navigate this chaos, it was him. A few clicks, and I found him. Widowed, freelance, living downtown. Hesitation hovered over the send button. Then, without overthinking, I pressed send. Jake's reply was swift. Olivia Reed, now there's a name from the past. Coffee tomorrow? We met at a cafe in the West Village. Jake looked different. Gray flecked his hair, lines etched his face, but his gaze was as sharp as ever. He watched me intently, a faint smile playing on his lips, as if he'd been expecting this. Olivia, he greeted, his voice warm, familiar. It's been too long. We exchanged pleasantries, the usual small talk about jobs, cities, mutual acquaintances, but he sensed the undercurrent, the tension beneath my practiced smile. He leaned back, eyes narrowed thoughtfully. So, he probed gently, what's the real reason you wanted to meet? I didn't answer immediately. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, scrolled to the photo of Richard and Beth outside the hotel. I handed it to him, hand steady, heart hammering. Jake studied the photo, expression unreadable, silence stretched. So, he finally said, setting the phone down. What are you going to do about it? Not what you'd expect, I replied, a hard edge to my voice. Pity, sympathy, not what I needed. I needed someone who understood the cold satisfaction of control. Jake's gaze sharpened, intrigue sparking in his eyes. You want to make them pay. Yes, I said, the word a release, a thrill. But I can't do it alone. Jake was surprisingly receptive, maybe too much so. He wasn't just intrigued, he seemed eager to dive into the murky waters of revenge. He listened as I outlined my initial thoughts, nodding, occasionally interjecting with sharper, more calculated suggestions. Together, we began to sketch a plan, a sequence of events designed to destabilize, manipulate, and ultimately shatter the facade of Richard and Beth's affair. Jake had a natural talent for this. He proposed subtle tactics, planting seeds of doubt, fostering mistrust, eroding their relationship from within. An anonymous tip here, a misleading hint there. His journalistic instincts were honed for this kind of psychological warfare. He knew how to craft a narrative, how to shape perception, and this time, the narrative would be one of betrayal, suspicion, and inevitable ruin. I was captivated by Jake's intensity, his willingness to embrace the darkness. As he spoke, a dormant part of me awakened. There was something exhilarating, almost seductive, about taking control, about meticulously crafting a plan. Years spent as the supportive wife, the accommodating partner were over. I was ready to be something else entirely. Our first move was simple, elegant. Jake drafted an anonymous letter typed meticulously on an old typewriter he'd kept, a relic of his trade. The letter hinted at secrets, unseen betrayals, vague enough to sow doubt, specific enough to prick Richard's paranoia. We knew Richard's mind, his lawyerly suspicion. He'd become hyper-alert, searching for cracks in Beth's story, in everything. We mailed the letter to his office, anonymously, then waited. A week crawled by. One evening, across the dinner table, I saw the shift. Tension coiled in Richard's posture, a distracted glaze in his eyes. He was present, but not here. His gaze drifted, fingers tapping restlessly on the mahogany. Something on your mind? I asked, feigning innocence. He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Nothing important. Lie. I tasted a dark satisfaction, the betrayer now haunted by the same gnawing fear. Paranoia flickered in his eyes, the way he glanced at his phone, the slight jump when it vibrated. In the days that followed, his behavior spiraled. Midnight walks, claiming fresh air, hours locked in his study, door bolted. I watched him unravel, each tremor a small victory. But this was just the overture. With Richard showing cracks, Jake and I moved to the next phase. Jake, with his journalist connections, had access to databases most people didn't know existed. We dove into records, financial documents, any scrap of information on Beth's past. It felt surreal, like descending into a clandestine underworld, far removed from my carefully ordered life. But there was a dark thrill in it. Bingo, Jake said one evening, pointing at his laptop screen. This might be gold. I leaned in, reading. Years ago, Beth had been embroiled in a lawsuit with a former employer over finances. Whispers of embezzlement, though no charges were filed. A flicker of excitement. This was the kind of skeleton that could shatter Beth's carefully constructed persona. Perfect, I whispered, barely containing my glee. We need to be careful, Jake cautioned, his voice low. Too direct, they'll smell a setup, but hints in the right places. His voice trailed off, the implication hanging heavy. We both understood. The next day, I made an anonymous call to Richard's office, using a voice modulator Jake had provided, disguising my voice into a low, husky whisper. You should know, I said, voice hushed, conspiratorial. Your friend has a complicated past. Look into the Bayer Corporation embezzlement case. I hung up before he could respond, heart racing, picturing his reaction, the disbelief, the dawning suspicion as he unearthed Beth's hidden history. It didn't take long. Richard grew more withdrawn, his usual swagger diminished. A tense undercurrent ran beneath his forced composure. Distrust flickered in his eyes whenever Beth's name surfaced. One night, I caught him hunched over his laptop, the screen casting an eerie glow on his face, brow furrowed in concentration. Up late, I commented casually, feigning sleepiness, peering over his shoulder. He snapped the laptop shut too quickly. Just work, he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. Satisfaction surged. A man consumed by his own secrets, unable to meet his wife's eyes. It wasn't long before I orchestrated a chance encounter with Beth herself. Unplanned, but seeing her alone at the local gourmet market, studying wine labels, was too tempting. I approached, warmest smile plastered on my face, adopting an innocent cheerfulness that caught her off guard. Beth, fancy meeting you here, I gushed. Her smile faltered, a split-second flicker of panic before she composed herself. Olivia, hi. Yes, just wine. She was on edge, radiating nervous energy. I watched her, noting the subtle tells, the tightening around her eyes, the forced brightness of her smile. Someone hiding something, and she knew I could see it. Richard's been so preoccupied lately, I continued, voice casual, picking up a bottle of wine, pretending to examine the label. Work, I suppose. You know how it is. Her eyes darted nervously. Guilt? Fear? He's mentioned you a lot lately, I pressed, lowering my voice slightly, leaning closer. Seems concerned. You okay? Beth paled. Her smile wavered, then vanished completely. Tension tightened her features. Oh, yes. Fine. Really. She tried for nonchalance, but her eyes betrayed her. You sure? I leaned closer, dropping the cheerful facade. Wouldn't want anything unfortunate to happen. Richard hates surprises. With that, I walked away, savoring the unsettled look in her eyes, the dawning realization that she was no longer safe. Jake and I were spending more and more time together. Our meetings, initially tactical discussions, had morphed into something else entirely. I found myself looking forward to our late-night talks, the shared laughter, the lingering glances. His presence was a comfort, a reminder of a simpler time. One evening, in his dimly lit apartment, wine glasses half empty, strategy maps scattered on the coffee table, Jake reached across, his hand covering mine. Olivia, he began, voice soft, serious. I never told you this back then, but I always had feelings for you, even when we were just friends. My pulse quickened, a warmth spreading through me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Honesty in his gaze, a sense of being seen, truly seen in a way Richard never had. Jake, I murmured, caught off guard, an unexpected thrill mixed with confusion. This is complicated. I know, he replied, voice barely a whisper. But maybe it doesn't have to be. We lingered, a breath away from something transformative. I didn't pull away. The line between revenge and something deeper had blurred, and I wasn't sure where one ended and the other began. Days turned into weeks. Our plan unfolded, each twist adding complexity. Richard and Beth grew more distant, their interaction strained, laced with suspicion and resentment. I watched from the sidelines, a detached observer, savoring every tense exchange, every flicker of doubt. But amidst the satisfaction, a growing unease settled between Jake and me. Our relationship had shifted, the unspoken tension harder to ignore. One evening, reviewing our next steps, Jake leaned back, a frown creasing his forehead. We need to be careful, Olivia, he warned, his voice serious. Things are getting messy. What do you mean? I asked, surprised by his hesitation. We're playing with fire, he said, gaze intense. And it's not just Richard and Beth who could get burned. We're risking everything. I brushed off his concern, a forced smile. Isn't that what makes it exciting? But in the back of my mind, a seed of doubt took root. Had we gone too far? No. Too deep to turn back now. The thrill of revenge had become addictive, a current pulling me under. Richard, always in control, his authority a second skin, was cracking. The anonymous calls, the letters, the carefully planted whispers about Beth's past had visibly shaken him. He barely met my eyes, suspicion and frustration etched on his face. Tension crackled in our apartment, a constant hum of unease that kept me on edge, exhilarated. One evening, Richard confronted me, voice tight with suppressed fury. "Have you been talking to people about us?" he demanded abruptly, eyes narrowed. I feigned confusion. "What are you talking about?" He looked away, jaw clenched. "Never mind," he muttered, as if realizing he'd overstepped. But the doubt was eating him alive, just as planned. That night, across the dinner table, I watched him brood, his mind a whirlwind of questions. He was unraveling, finally experiencing the helplessness I'd felt when I discovered his betrayal. A few days later, a man outside our building caught my eye, standing by the curb, nondescript in a dark coat, leaning against a car. Passerby? Waiting for someone? But his gaze was fixed on our building, watchful, calculating. Unease prickled my skin. That evening, I mentioned it to Jake. "Richard's hired a private investigator, I think," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Jake's expression darkened. "That complicates things. Sharper tone than usual. If he's digging into you, into us, we need to be more careful." Jake was more concerned than he let on. His gaze lingered, a mix of protectiveness and unease. He was invested in this revenge, in me. Something deeper in his eyes, a hint of fear. "What are you thinking?" I asked, searching his face. Jake hesitated, then took my hand. "Olivia, we can't afford any mistakes. If this investigator digs too deep, it could all collapse." His words sent a chill. Forced a smile, refusing to let fear take hold. Too far to back down. Beth was cracking. The stress was taking its toll. Her confident facade crumbling, replaced by a fragile, jittery woman, a pale imitation of the polished friend I once knew. Missing work, personal reasons, Richard couldn't ignore. One afternoon, I saw her at a cafe alone, corner table, exhausted, makeup smudged, red-rimmed eyes, stirring coffee, lost in thought. I couldn't resist. Warmest smile approached. "Beth?" I greeted, feigned surprise. "You okay?" Her gaze snapped up, a flicker of panic. "Olivia, didn't see you." Edgy, hands trembling, setting coffee down. Anxiety, guilt, simmering, satisfying, vindication for what she'd done. Leaned in, voice lowered. "Heard about Richard. Everything okay? You safe?" Face paled, looked away, shame and fear etched deep. "I don't know what you mean," whispered voice, barely audible. Knew she understood. Cracking under deception, and I wouldn't stop until her life crumbled completely. As Beth's world imploded, the barrier between Jake and me dissolved. No longer just partners in revenge. Meetings more intimate, unspoken tension. Thrill of our plan ignited something. One evening, Jake reached for my hand, held it, looked into my eyes. "Olivia," he began, voice quiet. This started about Richard, but words trailed off, conflict in his eyes. Something beyond revenge, pang of uncertainty, didn't anticipate depth of his feelings, impact on me. "Jake," I whispered, emotion stirring. Didn't expect this. Neither of us moved, air thick with unspoken. Realized Jake no longer just ally. Something more. Made me feel alive. Richard never had. Connection deepened, danger lurking. Bound by secrets, desires. Plan failed, we both lose everything. Investigators' presence, growing anxiety. Saw him more, watching our building, making notes, phone calls, closing in. Only time before he exposed us. One evening, Richard confronted me, kitchen, face tense, eyes accusing. Held up papers, anonymous notes. Jake and I crafted to chip away confidence. "Explain these, Olivia," demanded, voice low, dangerous, feigned confusion, best act. "What are you talking about?" Why would I know? Unconvinced. Stepped closer, fierce gaze, shadow of man I knew. "Think I don't see?" trying to destroy me, planting seeds, haven't you? Pulse quickened, kept composure, met gaze steadily. Why would I do that, Richard? If anyone's guilty, it's you. Scoffed. Expression twisting, bitter resentment. Think you're clever, don't you? Innocent wife, plotting with whoever's helping you. Accusation stung, held ground, refusing to show fear. No proof, replied, voice steady. Accuse all you want, won't change what you did. You brought this on yourself. Turned, walked away, left him standing alone, anger simmering. Turning point, facade crumbling, didn't care. Too far to back down. Late, noticed investigator again. Car across street, silhouette in dim light. Feeling he was closing in. Presence more frequent, watchfulness constant. Reminder plan not hidden as hoped. Next morning, Richard confronted me, face shadowed, intensity I hadn't seen. Held up printed paper, knuckles white with anger. Anonymous bank deposits in our account? Explain. Stared at paper, recognized Jake's subtle contributions. Money for setup, anonymous tips, investigator distraction, misleading Beth, small payments. Jake's meticulous planning, one flaw. Traceable deposits linked back to us. Feigning innocence, shook head. Don't know what you're talking about, Richard. Stepped closer, face inches from mine. This isn't some game, Olivia. I know something's going on, hiding things, done playing along. Words struck cold. Shed the mask, revealed part of himself I'd never seen or wanted to see. Later, met Jake, usual spot. Expression told me he knew about investigators' breakthrough. Doubt lingered in his gaze. Might have to pull back, he said, voice tinged regret. If he's finding links to us. No, I interrupted, sharper voice. Too far to turn back. Jake sighed, rubbed hand over face. Olivia, this isn't just about revenge anymore. We're both at risk. Maybe it's time to end this before it goes further. Pause. Words heavy between us. First time, resentment toward him. He'd been there from start, fueling fire, encouraging every twist. Now second thoughts. What happened to the Jake who was willing to take risks? I challenged, low voice. The one who said he'd stand by me no matter what? He hesitated, hint of fear in his eyes. This isn't just a game, Olivia. This could ruin us both. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Taste of control, thrill of watching Richard unravel, intoxicating. Too deep to abandon it all. Next day, unexpected call. Beth's close friend. Voice, tense, anxious. Olivia, not sure if you heard, but Beth. Hospital. Breakdown, they said. So much pressure lately. Thought you should know. News struck like physical blow. Hadn't intended this. Wanted to unsettle, let her feel insecurity, betrayal, but hadn't expected her to break. Later, alone in quiet apartment, strange mix of satisfaction, unease. Not envisioned this, but couldn't deny the power, sense of reclaiming control. Hollow pang, realizing I was losing sight of who I once was. Days passed. Intense silence. Richard, more paranoid than ever, increasingly erratic, spending nights away, muttering about taking care of things, but knew he was hiding, retreating from mess. One evening, returned home, face drawn, mix of anger, desperation. Think you're clever, don't you, Olivia? Playing victim, pulling strings. Feigned innocence, but he saw through it, piercing gaze. I know you're behind this, he continued whisper. Don't know how, but I'll find out. And when I do... Didn't finish. Threat lingered. First time, chill of fear. Richard willing to do anything to regain control. No longer game, battle. Both willing to fight to bitter end. Tension between Jake and me simmering, strained relationship, weight of what we'd set in motion. Grown distant, less willing to meet, gaze shadowed with doubt. Bond, trust, companionship. Fueling revenge, slipping away. One evening, met me, unfamiliar expression, guilt, something else. Olivia, he began, hesitant tone. I don't know if I can keep doing this. Words struck cold. What are you saying, Jake? He looked away, avoiding gaze. This has gone too far. Beth's in hospital. Richard's desperate. Isn't just revenge anymore. It's betrayal, I finished, voice thick bitterness. Don't you dare back out now. We had a plan, Jake. But silence told me everything. Lost him. Man who stood by me, faltering, unwilling to follow down path we'd chosen. In that moment, understood I was alone. No allies left, no one I could trust. Jake betrayed me. Richard would stop at nothing to expose my role. That night, returned home, Richard waiting, triumph and fury. Held file, investigator's report, proof of everything Jake and I orchestrated. Thought you could ruin me, he snarled contempt. Thought I wouldn't find out? Surge of panic underestimated him. Then, cold calm settled. Knew this moment would come, reckoning, and I was ready. Met his gaze unflinching. Yes, I did, and I'd do it again. Face twisted rage, hands clenching file. Think you've won, don't you? Don't need to win, I replied, steady voice. Just needed you to feel what it's like to lose everything. Silence, realization dawning in his eyes. Understanding he'd lost control, carefully constructed life shattered by own betrayal. Without another word, he left, door slamming shut. Alone, silence heavy, consequences settling, shroud. After Richard left, apartment emptier than ever. Wandered rooms, each corner reminder of life we'd shared. Photos on walls, vacations, anniversaries, birthdays, moments frozen, untouched by betrayal, silently unraveled everything beneath surface. Photos, we looked happy, now ghosts, relics of life no longer existed. Quiet followed, hollow ache. I had won, hadn't I? Richard's life shambles, Beth crumbled, Jake showed true colors, loyalty fragile as love. But was it worth it? Poured wine, let silence settle. Spent so long crafting plan, meticulously orchestrating, now over, unmoved, purpose gone. Chasing revenge, destroyed everything, lost myself. Few days later, Jake showed up, doorstep. Weary, shadow of man we first reunited. Expression unreadable, regret, something else. Olivia, he began, quiet voice. Wanted to apologize. Shouldn't have acted like that. Wasn't prepared for everything. Stared at him. Surge anger. Strange relief. Come to apologize. Make amends. Anything left to salvage. Apologies don't mean much now, do they? I replied. Sharp tone. We've both done things we can't undo. He looked away, shoulders slumping. Thought revenge would be simple. Satisfying. All I feel now is regret. Bitter laugh escaped. Regret? You have luxury of walking away, Jake. Go back to your life. But I have to live with consequences. He didn't answer. Moment silence. Two people bound by shared guilt, bitterness. Realized Jake been vessel for anger, way to project pain. Now, nothing left to hold us together. Without another word, closed door, shut him out for good. Week later, letter in mail. Plain envelope, unfamiliar handwriting. Opened, knew it was from Richard. Olivia, you wanted to see me suffer, succeeded. Everything I built, every relationship, gone. You took it all. Don't know if you'll find satisfaction, hope you do, because in end, realize none of it matters. We spend lives building things torn down moment by people we trust most. Enjoy victory. It's yours now. E. Sat down, reread letter over and over. Close to admission of defeat, as Richard would give. Yet, instead of satisfaction craved, all felt was hollow emptiness. He was right. I had won. But doing so destroyed very life I'd fought so hard to protect. Days followed, drawn to memories of who I once was. Moments remembered woman who married Richard, young, hopeful bride, believed promises, shared dreams. Felt like stranger now, barely recognized. Thought of Beth, guilt, shame she must have felt final days before breakdown. Wondered if she'd ever thought of me, if she'd ever felt remorse. In end, didn't matter. Beth gone, life irrevocably changed. Woman I called friend, nothing more than shadow. Jake, old friend, once ally, faded background. Presence, nothing more than reminder lengths I'd gone for revenge. Thought of him as partner, man who shared anger, desire for justice. Now realized Jake been as lost as I was. In end, both chasing something could never truly heal us. One evening, alone in quiet apartment, reflecting on choices. Anger driven me, need for control, desire to see Richard suffer, consumed me, turned me into someone barely recognized. Now left with ruins of life I'd cherished, life willingly destroyed. Final act of closure, gathered photos, mementos of our life, placed them in box. Last look at images, frozen smiles, shared moments before sealing shut. Time to let go, release memories bound me to life no longer existed. As closed box, strange sense of peace, quiet acceptance of what I'd done. Sought revenge, won. But doing so, discovered victory comes at cost, one I'd pay for rest of life. Months passed, gradually, began to rebuild. Found new place to live, smaller, simpler, didn't carry weight of past. Began to reconnect with old friends, people untouched by chaos of revenge. Slow process, tentative step toward new life. Moments, memories returned, fleeting images of Richard, Beth, Jake, reminders of choices made. But let them pass, allowing myself to move forward without being weighed down by regret. In end, realized revenge been lesson, dark journey, shown me depths of own anger, capacity for destruction. But also taught me importance of letting go, finding peace within myself, instead of seeking it downfall of others. As walked forward into unknown, quiet strength, knowledge that though lost much, gained something more valuable, reclaimed myself.